The truth I know from more than a century of living. The reality of a world where I can step through a moonlit gate in Tokyo and onto a sun-washed beach in Rio. Times sideways, and times forward, times backwards, and upside down. Today on the Comic Book Report, X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine. Stick around and check it out. Greetings, bub. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning into the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And at long last, I've finally made my way through X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine. Wolverine being one of my all-time favorite characters, I knew it was a matter of time before I gave this a read. I was elated to pick this up for Christmas, and I cannot wait to review it all for you today. So let's get started. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Benjamin Percy and illustrated by Joshua Cassara and Federico Vincentini. The issues in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2022. The volume itself collects X Lives of Wolverine issues 1 through 5 and X Deaths of Wolverine issues 1 through 5. And finally, this oversized hardcover comes in at 304 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. I should also note this collection has a parental advisory, I presume for violence and a situation of sexuality. The nudity is kind of obscured, but I wanted to give a note on that as well. Okay, and here's our look at that oversized hardcover collection from Benjamin Percy. This is X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine, and wow, was this a blast of a read. As far as the cover goes, stylistically, it's very similar to these Krakoa era oversized hardcovers. The spine is pretty similar. The back is that minimalist layout. The color they chose is a bright yellow, which is a lot of fun. Overall, a really great, well-made collection here. It is, like I said, oversized, and it has a nice glossy paper stock throughout. I will say the cover price is $75, which for 300 pages is tough to swallow. I think that that's one of the biggest drawbacks from this book is simply the price point. But as far as the art and story content and actual put-togetherness of this book, it's all outstanding. And now after this last quick look at the dust jacket, I'll show you the under the dust jacket we have here. Like I said, it's very minimalist, kind of like the other oversized hardcover collections. I love this bright, almost fluorescent highlighter yellow. It's really striking and just a gorgeous looking book. I definitely believe that this is a Wolverine volume. I also wanted to quickly show the direct market cover for this same volume. This is an alternate cover you can get from direct market sellers. And I, of course, have the standard, which you've seen. And now that we're finishing up the exterior work, I'll go ahead and take a moment to check out the book's binding for you all to see. So this book does have sewn binding. It's very comparable to, again, the other oversized hardcovers in this line. No real complaints here. There is a little bit of gutter loss, but I will say the book really stays open well on its own, and you'll see that throughout this video. Now I just want to take a second, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to my channel. I do multiple comic book reviews just like this every week. Thank you so much for thinking about it. Okay, and without further ado, it's time to dive into the actual collection itself, and I cannot wait to talk about X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine. Okay, so one of the first questions you might get is, when do you start reading this? When does this take place? I think bare minimum reading requirements I would highly recommend prior to starting this book would be House of X, Powers of 10, and Inferno from Jonathan Hickman. I think after that you can read X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine. Others I would definitely recommend as well is the Wolverine run and the X-Force run by Benjamin Percy. I think that that really sets up a good tone for this book. He's played with a lot of these same characters in those titles already, so you get a real consistent feeling from the Wolverine of this era if you've read some of those. But I think the only real required reading I'd really suggest are House of X, Powers of 10, along with Inferno, and then you can probably give this a read. So this does take place after the Inferno event, and it feels pretty soon after it. And what I mean by that is it picks up right with the narrative threads, particularly having to do with Moira MacTaggert and Mystique and Destiny. We know that all of those things were building even from House of X Powers of 10 way back when. And if you need a refresher on that, I did cover that storyline in a previous video, along with Inferno and some of these other ones I've already mentioned. I'll try to link a few in the video description. So after the events of X-Men Inferno, again, a little bit of spoilers for that, but that should be prerequisite reading for this anyway, so here we go. At the end of the Inferno event, we have Moira MacTaggert, the mutant who kind of kickstarted this whole Krakoa era. We find her depowered after she got hit by Forge's gun that took away her mutant lives power. So now she's a human, she's on the run, and the mutants are looking for her. Primarily Mystique and Destiny, who are completely out for blood. And you might be asking, why am I talking about Moira MacTaggert so much? Because as much as this is called X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine, it really should be Wolverine and Moira MacTaggert. Because I feel like this book, if not an even split, is at least 75-25, with favoring Wolverine but still having an awful lot of Moira MacTaggert character development. I heard some people complain about this quite a bit, wanting just a Wolverine story, but I found all the Moira stuff at least as engaging as the Wolverine aspects of this story. And as a fan of this whole Krakoa era, I know that Moira MacTaggert is really at the core of a lot of the central storytelling. So the fact that we get to advance more of her story, particularly after Inferno, I was absolutely hooked throughout this whole adventure. So anyway, the story kicks off following Wolverine maybe 50, 60 years ago, maybe even longer. It's the night that Professor Xavier is born to his parents. We have Wolverine breaking into the house during this home birth scene because Omega Red is somehow possessing the nursemaid and the people over there to try to destroy this newborn baby Professor X, and Wolverine seems to be all that stands in the way of Professor X being executed back in time. Simultaneously, we also have Moira MacTaggert after she escapes Destiny and Mystique at the end of Inferno, finding that she's actually dying of cancer and is also still being hunted and completely on the run. We know that in addition to the mutants, she's also under observation from the CIA and all of these other powers that be, so she's sort of forfeiting her life in all of these crazy conspiracies, and she's just kind of done with it. But she sees the mutant threat, and at this point, she almost wants to just burn it down. So from here, we kind of have twin narratives going throughout some of this book, sometimes alternating every other issue, though there is some crossover. In the primary story following Wolverine, we get more context to what's going on with Omega Red. It looks like he is teaming up with Colossus's brother, I believe his name's Mikhail. He's got his hands on a Cerebro sword that we know about, and somehow he's using that technology with his powers to send Omega Red back in time. The plot device is very similar to those that have seen the Days of Future Past movie, where they send Wolverine back in time, his consciousness. They do that with Wolverine in this as well, and a kind of weird version of it with Omega Red. They kind of justify, hey, Omega Red is now trying to stop Xavier at any cost. So he's going throughout time, different stages of Xavier's life or his parents' life, trying to destroy him. And Omega has this weird power where he can kind of corrupt and possess these people in the past and still use his kind of tentacle weird things, and he's just trying to destroy him at all costs. Meanwhile, we have Wolverine being projected back in time by Charles Xavier and Jean Grey to kind of try to stop him all throughout time. So his main narrative thread throughout this book is a time-traveling, jumping adventure, sometimes really out of sequence, just hunting down Omega Red and trying to stop him before he kills Xavier or anyone in Xavier's prior history that could spawn Xavier and bring forth the current Krakoa era. So it's a really cool time travel narrative that we get to see a lot of layers to, and I really love that. Over on Moira MacTaggert's end, she's just trying to survive. She's trying to get information out there. She's trying at one point to get her powers back. Then it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. She's trying to basically stop the mutants. And she's become sort of this wanderer, outcast, fugitive. And her story arc is honestly really sad and heartbreaking. She tries to disguise her identity. She tries to elude capture and all of these things. Another plot thread in the present that's happening is there's a future version of Wolverine that's been completely taken over by this kind of techno-organic virus who's basically trying to fight off a hive mind but also trying to prevent his future by all cost. So this is another interesting wrinkle, and because he's in the present and because Professor X and Jean Grey are so preoccupied by making sure the normal Wolverine is doing all his time travel adventures correctly, he dispatches Dakin and X-23, the all-new Wolverine, Laura Kinney, and the clone of Laura Kinney. They have all of them dispatch all these other kind of present Wolverines trying to stop this future Wolverine. So there's all these different plot threads that are going on, and I just love it. I feel like it's done really masterfully, especially when you're dealing with time travel and with all these sequences out of order. There is just kind of a beautiful narrative through line that makes it easy to follow even as you jump around. As a big Wolverine fan, I love seeing little snapshots of eras in his history, both when he was serving in like the Weapon X program, when he first is being experimented on, all the way back to when he was a child and had the bone claws, and kind of everything in between. We hit a lot of these interesting snapshots from the life of Wolverine, some maybe we don't know as much detail for, and we get to see him try to prevent certain things in the past or shift things or certainly try to keep Xavier alive, but it's really interesting to note how he handles just dealing with all of this past trauma and how he tries to change what he can, move forward with what he can, but also just psychologically kind of being beaten up and broken down, having to revisit all these chapters in his life. I do think that this is first and foremost a Wolverine story, then secondarily a Moira MacTaggert story, and all of the rest. Overall, I really loved it. It might be my favorite Omega Red story to have this kind of almost Terminator, this malevolent presence jumping through time trying to stop Xavier. He was just malicious and scary as all get out, and I loved following those adventures and those fights. This is a pretty violent book. I didn't find it overly graphic as far as violence is concerned. I think especially if you've read Benjamin Percy's Wolverine or X-Force, this is certainly no worse than that. As far as the sexuality that depicts in this, there is a kind of romance scene with one of his previous loves in Japan. There's no outright nudity, but there is a sexualized situation and a situation where there's female nudity that's kind of obscured or covered. I don't really love that. I try to avoid comics with nudity, and this just barely hit my boundary line. I think it's still, like I said, everything was covered, but it was still a little bit too risque for my taste personally. But it was really only about one scene at one point in this flashback. But overall, really a good book. I really enjoyed what we learned about Wolverine, what we see explored with Moira MacTaggert, and even the history of the Xaviers. I think that there's so many rich details here that it made this the standout Wolverine event that I've read in so long. I can't remember a Wolverine-centric story arc I've maybe liked as much as this in quite a while, especially for this contemporary era. I really, really enjoyed my time with it. I just wish the price point was a bit lower so that I feel like this could have been more accessible to more readers, but this collection is, I believe, still a bit overpriced for what you get. I had Christmas gift cards, so I was really eager to cash in and check this out, but I think the reason I held off from getting this from so long is just how expensive it was. I wish that the cover price for this was something closer to $50 and that you could maybe find it for even cheaper than that in other sellers. But the fact that this had a $75 price tag, to me, that's almost as much as you'd pay for something like an omnibus, and I don't know that this content really holds up as far as that much content for that price point. Taking a moment just to talk on the art for a second, you have the two artists switching back, I believe, with the X Lives and X Deaths series, but the art style is comparable enough that I wasn't really taken out of the event, to the point where I don't know when these artists alternated. I've seen some by issue, but I don't know if it was even back and forth. It was really hard for me to notice that. I was so absorbed in the story, and I felt like the art style was comparable enough that it was never jarring. It wasn't like a very drastic art difference. In the same way, when I reviewed the Matt Fraction Fantastic Four omnibus not too long ago, we switched off between Mark Bagley and Mike Allred, which those are such different graphic styles that there was a really punctuated difference between the issues that were illustrated by each of those artists. With Here I think it blends a bit more seamlessly, and I really liked that. I felt like I was really able to engage and be immersed in the storytelling without being thrown off by the art style. And I really, really enjoyed that. The art throughout was really crisp. I know that these artists, especially Cassera, has really done other work on this era. And so it was a very familiar look to all the characters. I think that it was a very, recognizable character models, and I loved that. And like I said, I think the primary characters we see are really Wolverine, Omega Red, and Moira MacTaggert, but there is a healthy amount from other mutants as well, like Professor X and Jean Grey and Beast, and just so many more. But like I said, that's why if you've read like the X-Force run, you'll be familiar with a lot of the faces that pop up in this era for this comic, and it was just a ton of fun. I really liked also, this was maybe a little strange, but I did enjoy it for the novelty of it. The issue that showcases Wolverine's time being experimented on in the Weapon X program, it actually shows a scene where the Venom symbiote overtakes Wolverine, which has never really been explored before. It was really jarring and unusual to see, but a venomized Wolverine within this collection was definitely a delightful little surprise, and artistically just looked really cool. I've just never seen something like that. I also think because we get so many different incarnations and iterations of Omega Red throughout this as he jumps from body to body, seeing all the tentacles and the creepy artwork and the Omega symbol everywhere, the art was just really outstanding, and I got to see these characters in a lot of new different ways. Even characters like Wolverine, we get to see him throughout all these different ages and time periods, and even different stages of his development or growth. We get to see kind of a teen Wolverine that's a little scrawnier, and then the Wolverine we know and love. And then if you add the future Wolverine that has the kind of machine virus in him, we just get to see him in a lot of different ways, and I liked that. Ultimately, the story kind of culminates with Wolverine stopping Omega Red and just getting into this absolute brawl that was excellent. And then after that, kind of realizing that that was the penultimate threat, and he still has to fight and finish off the Wolverine from the future. So the final battle is really Wolverine versus Wolverine, and that was an excellent fight as well. Loved the action, loved the drama. I think everything built up to a head, and the moments were just so well paid off throughout this collection. And then finally, the sort of epilogue, or the thing that happens at the very end of this whole series, we have Moira MacTaggert, who we believed had died. We actually have her returning from the dead as a full-on machine. Like, she's basically imparted her mind into the body of a machine, which is so frightening considering the kind of machine uprising future we've seen threatened throughout all of this Krakoa era. One of the things they're majorly trying to avoid. So to see Moira, such a key figure for the mutants and the building of Krakoa, now as this machine presence, I thought that was a masterstroke and a very fun development in this ongoing narrative throughout this Krakoa era. I'll be honest, this is the most recent thing I've read in the X-Men universe now, and I know that they've gone past this by like almost a year at this point, so I can't wait to see what's coming. For anyone who's reading currently with X-Men books, with as little spoilers as possible, how is it going? I'm so curious where this is going. I know that Marvel's announced in 2023 the fall of X. I'm not sure if that's going to be the capstone of this entire era. It sounds like it might be, and I'm just hoping this thing really sticks the landing, because I've loved following all of these adventures I've been able to collect so far. And of course you get to see all the variant covers at the back, a nice touch, some healthy extras here. Like I said, I think the price point might be a little high, but at the same time, this is such a must-read for X-Men and Wolverine fans. It's hard to know what to do with it. And finally, I thought I'd give a quick look at some of my recommended reading prior to reading X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine. Again, that's House of X, Powers of 10, Benjamin Percy's X-Force run, Wolverine run, and of course Jonathan Hickman's Inferno. While not all of this might be required, I think that this is a nice sampling of the more recent X-Men books that lead in very well to this story. I do think you can enjoy it without these, but I'd at least recommend House of X, Powers of 10, and Inferno. And now time for the grade. It shouldn't be a surprise after I've been raving about this throughout the whole video, but for me, the comic book report, I'm giving X Lives of Wolverine, X Deaths of Wolverine from Benjamin Percy a flat-out A. This is a must-read X-Men and Wolverine story in my mind. This is one of the shining high points of this era. For me, this might be right under House of X Powers of 10 as far as the quality is concerned. Maybe sandwiched between that and Inferno for just some of the top X books I've seen in recent years. For longtime Wolverine fans, there's fun explorations of his history done in refreshing new ways, and we also get finally more development from Moira MacTaggert in ways that were a ton of fun, at least for me. The price is overinflated, but it's worth the cost of admission. Let me know what you think. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much for watching along. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment, and until next time, have a good one.